thank you so much for having me this morning at your Mother's Day. I know as being a mum, I'm a mum myself, this journey can be quite hard sometimes, but also very challenging and very rewarding. So I hope you gained so much information from Abby. That was awesome. Thank you. And I hope I can follow suit and give you as much information, and I hope I can help you in your situation in your home and your family. So a little bit about me. I'm a wife. I'm a mother to 3 very busy kids. I am a pediatric occupational therapist, and I've been working in various schools. Previously, I worked at Livingston. I used to work at the Grey Swing at Ashton, and now I'm in private practice. So you might ask yourself, what is occupational therapy or OT? So very quickly, OT looks at how a disability or a limitation or impairment affects how you function in your everyday life. So more importantly, what is preventing you from doing the things that you need to carry out? So they can be anything from physical to psychological or developmental. So an OT looks at formulating action plans that can best help you to make sure that you can continue those activities of daily living. So if it's like a physical limitation, if you have a spinal cord injury, how does an OT help you transfer from your wheelchair to your bed, from your wheelchair to your adaptive car? More importantly for a child, how does a difficulty or limitation prevent a child from doing the activities that they need to do? So when we look at pediatric OT, we look at how a limitation affects the development of a child's play. Play is the most important thing for a child. It's their form of work. It's how they learn and interact with their environment. As an OT, what we look at is when does that a limitation or impairment affect the development of play or the various stages of play. And we look at what they should be achieving at that age in their development and how best to encourage them to achieve that going forward. We can liken a child's development to that of a house. If your foundations of the house are not firm or secure or have gaps, how can you build your walls, and how can you have a firm and stable wall or roof if your walls are not firm and your foundation is not firm? It's similar for that with a child. Should their development be affected, their learning and mastering of everyday skills and formal academic learning will be hindered. So what do we look at as pediatric OTs? We look at development, namely integration of sensory information. We look at sensory motor skills, which is your gross motor development and your fine motor development. And we also look at visual perceptual skills. But more specifically for today, we're going to be looking at sensory registration, processing, and integration. And when do we need to be concerned when our child is seeking too much sensory information or avoiding sensory information? So we live in a sensory world. There's sensory information constantly bombarding us, and we are constantly filtering or attending to the sensory information. As functional adults, we learn to either pay attention to the information or we ignore it and become conditioned to it. But sometimes this is not always the case with our children. Our child might not be able to filter the incoming sensory information and can become overwhelmed or distracted by it, and that is when we become sensory sensitive or avoidant. Or they might not pay sufficient attention to the information or not react appropriately and need more information, and that's when they become sensory seeking. We not only have 5 basic sensory systems of touch, taste, smell, hear, and sight, touch, smell, taste, and hear, but we also have 2 more that relate to our bodies. So they are namely the vestibular system and the proprioceptive system. So the vestibular system is the way our body moves. Which way is our body moving to? Is it moving forwards? Is it moving backwards? Is it spinning around? Are we going off the surface of the earth even? So in the proprioceptive system, I'm going to get to that now. When we're dealing with the proprioceptive system, it's how much force your body uses or applies when you need to do an activity or an action. So if you see an unmarked box on the floor, your proprioceptive system will quickly calculate how much force or pressure you need to use or to exert in order to lift up that box, bearing in mind you have no idea what is in that box. You can do one of 3 things. You can either apply too much force and the box is too light and the box will go over your head, or you can apply too little force and then you have to retry lifting up that box and applying more force, or you can apply the right amount of force. It's your body's ability to use your muscles in response to your environment. So these 2 systems provide vital information about where your body is moving to and how to interact with your world. And together with the other 5 sensory systems, It gives your body something, it provides information about your body scheme, which is knowing how, where, and what to move your body and how to interact with our sensory world. So if your child has a difficulty with processing or registering sensory information, how then can we expect them to learn if their foundation of registering sensory information is faulty? Well, not faulty, has gaps. It's like that house analogy. Our base or our foundation is our sensory integration and registering. So we can't build walls, which is our gross motor, our fine motor, and our visual perception, and the roof being academic learning, if our foundation is not well formed or isn't firm. Does that all make sense? Okay. How we respond and process to sensory information doesn't really change as we grow. Okay, as adults, our sensory profiles, which is what we seek or avoid, becomes part and parcel of our everyday lives. We've learned as functional adults to incorporate it into our lives. We are functional despite our sensory preferences. For example, I seek out proprioceptive input. I brush my teeth hard. I go through toothbrushes twice as quickly as my husband. When I tie up my hair, which I don't anymore because it's so short, I tie it up hard. I give people hard hugs. I like to be under the duvet right here and to be nice and snug, and I don't like light things touching me. I want deep pressure. Okay, but my preference for seeking out proprioceptive input doesn't stop me from being a wife, a mother, an OT. It doesn't stop me from driving a car. I have incorporated my sensory preferences into my everyday life. However, for a child who struggles with that, it is very difficult to be functional in the areas that they need to be functional in. And that could be learning, their play, their learning, their eating, their dressing. And that's when we need to have intervention. That's when an OT is needed, because there's been a bit of a misstep in their development and their sensory systems are causing them not to be functional in the activities that they need to be. So you need to ask yourself, what is sensory seeking and what is sensory avoidance? So we just need to keep in mind those 7 systems that I mentioned just now. You can be seeking in one system and you can be avoidant in another. Each system is different. They don't run together or with each other. So sensory seeking is when you require more or intense input to register the sensory information. If you were to think of it as a cup, a sensory seeking child has a very big cup. They need more information for that cup to be filled and to register what is in that cup. These children don't fear heights. They are risk takers. They will be the first one climbing up the rickety jungle gym. They love doing those tree walks at Sugar Rush. They don't see the danger in some of their activities. They just see the need to move. They often hang upside down. Oh, this is for vestibular children, sorry. Children who are seeking vestibular input. They hang upside down, trying to get intense input by going into backward space. They are fidgety. They need to move whilst they are sitting at the table. They're wriggling their legs. They're tapping their pencil. They're chewing on their pencil. They need that movement to help activate that vestibular system. So when we're dealing with proprioception, a child who seeks proprioception will often play rough, hit, bang hard things, clap hard, bump into walls, bump into doors, walk on their tippy toes. When they're writing, they push really hard. They can't gauge how much force when they're writing. They will also rub out equally as hard. So the poor teachers who've got children who are proprioceptive seekers, their workbooks don't always look so nice. They need more feedback from the environment for them to feel what it is that they need to, how they need to move their body. So a child who seeks touch or is tactile seeking, they often won't register if their hands or their faces are dirty. And you can tell them 100 times, go and wash your face. Oh no, my face is fine. They don't register that their hands are dirty. Their pain tolerance is really, really high. They don't know when they've hurt themselves because they need more input to fill up that cup to register. They often break things that they play with or fiddle with because they can't, the feedback is not enough for them to realize that they've actually broken something. And then similarly for taste, smell, and hearing, a child will seek out noise or make noise. They're the ones that always are singing or humming or making clicking noises. Or they will seek out smells and tastes. just to try and activate those neural pathways. So if you are sensory avoidant, it is the opposite. Your cup is very small, and often you don't need a lot of input to register and process the incoming sensory information. And a child who's sensory sensitive will often remove themselves or avoid the task entirely if their tolerance is reached very quickly. These children are not adventurous. They often choose to wait, watch, and see before they get involved in a task. For a vestibularly sensitive child, they can become very anxious and overwhelmed when having to use lifts or escalators. I don't know if you've noticed that if you've got a child who is insecure. And especially now with all the fashion with houses to have stairs that don't have railings, or even floating stairs where they can see the ground over there, but their body is up here, it can be very overwhelming for those children. Not often do we get a child who is sensitive to proprioception, but when it does happen, that child will touch and do the activities of daily living and move through their life with very light, deft touch. They don't like deep pressure. They don't like being touched. So they'll do things very lightly, but we don't often see those type of children. For a child who is tactile sensitive or avoidant, this will impact greatly on the food that they eat, what they will tolerate, what they will wear, what they won't wear. We all know our children. We've all met children who don't like the tags in the back of their shirts or in their underpants, or the socks that have got the ribs. It's that those children are tactile sensitive. They don't like a change or a feeling that they get. They don't like to be hugged. Their personal space is very big. You know that those children don't want to touch. And we can even say that those children can liken touch to actually being quite painful. If it is a light touch, they feel it very intently, and it can actually be deemed as painful to them. So similarly for smell and hearing, children who are sensitive to those won't want to be in places where there's a strong odor or a strong smell or strong noise. And often children who are auditory sensitive will make noise, and you might say to me, but that's sensory seeking, but they make noise to cover up noise from the environment that they can't control. And it comes back into that autonomy, is that it's something that they can control versus something that they cannot control. So yeah, just a little bit of a side note. So in the OT world, I know I've given you lots of information. I hope I haven't overwhelmed you. But in the OT world, we look at a level called calm and alert. It is the beneficial level for a child to learn in their environment. It is when the child is calm and regulated and actively engaged in a task. And when they are actively engaged in a task, they are learning, they are mastering, and they are understanding the task, the environment, and their world around them. So when a child's sensory system is in overdrive, where they're either seeking or they are avoiding, can't be in that calm, alert state. And it's difficult to stay in that state. And that is often when we, as moms, see behavior, because it's an outward expression of that overreact or that overwhelmness, or being overwhelmed and being in overdrive. So as moms, we all know this is very challenging and overwhelming for us too. And I'm so glad that you spoke about co-regulation, because not only do we deal with regulation with our child, we also need to deal with our own regulation as parents. So it might just be a helpful or a good thing to analyze yourself, like I did with my proprioceptive system, and figure out what you seek and what you avoid, and see how it matches with your child. And when you can see that your sensory system and your child's sensory systems are clashing like the volcano, apply the techniques to you and your child, because it will help. So obviously, if your child seeks out or struggles with sensory input, where they either seek or avoid, it is important to maybe have an assessment done by an occupational therapist who has got an understanding of sensory integration and has that training, because it will give you a full and clear understanding of your child's sensory profile and how best to move forward with your child. Therapy not only deals with the session, it deals with home, it deals with school, it deals with a holistic approach to how to best manage behavior with your child. And remember, not all children are the same. What may work for one will not necessarily work for the other. And children, like adults, have good days and bad days. And you can seek more or avoid depending on where you are in your day emotionally. If they are upset, if they're hungry, if they are happy, their sensory seeking preference or their sensory preferences will be slightly different to a day where they might not be happy, or they might be hungry or upset. Okay, so some strategies. So for a child who is sensory seeking, the best way to fill up that big cup is to give them that input that they are seeking, but in more functional ways. If we fill up that cup consistently throughout their day, then that cup won't get half empty and the child won't have running on half empty, and he's seeking the behavior or the seeking the sensory input that they need. And therefore, we won't have behavior. So if you constantly fill that cup up throughout their day, in the morning before they go to school, when you come home after school, plan things that you know that are going to fill up that cup. So by the end of the day, you're not having this child who's not going to sleep because they're trying to seek and get all the input that they haven't had throughout their day. I need to give you caution here. This is where, as mums, you best understand your child. Don't give your child too much input that then pushes them into overdrive. Remember, your child's cup, you have to try and figure out what your child's cup is. And if you put too much and spills over, then your child is in overdrive, and now we've got another problem. So try and work out how much input and gauge from your child what input that they need and what best works for your child. As I said, one doesn't fit all. You have to do what works for your child. Okay, so what we can do is, a lot of therapists love these things. I love these sort of sensory diets. I don't like calling them a sensory diet because a diet for me is just negative. So I like to think of them as movement breaks. So when you know that you, like on a weekend or you've got an afternoon and you know that you're going to be in the car for a long time, or you know that you've got things happening and your child won't be able to have those moments where they can fill up their sensory cup, give them movement breaks that will help top up their cups. So some things like, even if you, in preparation to going out, if you know that you're going to be in an overwhelming or stimulating environment. So these are sort of some of the helpful hints that you can do beforehand. So you can get them to jump and crash on your bed, on your couch, on a trampoline. I know as moms we don't like our beds being messy and our houses being messy and our couches, but if you can, a trampoline is the best, but if you can't, you can always use a bed or a couch. Get them to jump and crash. You can do some horseplay or some wrestling. That is a lovely way of getting both vestibular and probe and tactile input into your child's sensory system by doing some horseplay. Be just aware of safety, and also remember, if you put too much input, that cup will overflow. So just try and maybe put a timer on the horseplay, because sometimes with horseplay and wrestling, it can push them over. You can do things like roly-polies, where you can roll down the passage on your head, or you can even do sideways roly-polies. So I know when you're doing roly-polies going forward, you're going in a very linear motion. So that motion is very calming. It is not an overwhelming motion. Whereas if you go sideways or spinning, it can be it's a rotational movement, and it can be overwhelming sometimes. You can even put a weighted blanket on them. I know sometimes when the child goes to sleep, a weighted blanket is a really good idea to just give them that deep pressure and that probe to help regulate them into sleeping. You can get your child involved in heavy work activities at home. Get them to ride a bike, hang from the monkey bars, but obviously with safety. You can get them involved in gardening, helping you with gardening, or sorting out and packing things away in the house. Anything that gives resistance. Swimming and horseback riding and wrestling are wonderful activities that you can do as extramural activities to help them get vestibular and proprioceptive input. You can even, and I know I say this with caution because I know a ball in a house can be good and bad. But you can even get your child to sit on a ball if you're at the dinner table or if you're doing homework, big therapy ball, so that they can just sit and bounce and get that probe and that vestibular input. Don't let it become the soccer ball of the house, because you won't have any windows. You can use that ball also to make something that I call a sandwich. So you ask your child to lie on the floor like a starfish on their back, and they are the bottom piece of bread. And you roll the ball over their body with a little bit of pressure. So you roll it over your arms, over your tummy, over your legs. Avoid the face, because that is quite overwhelming if you're having a ball rolled over your face. And you ask them what is on their sandwich. And it can be the most ludicrous ingredients ever. And you just ask them, What do you want in the sandwich? Oh, I want some chips. So then you roll the ball over the body and say, okay, right, you've got your chips. What's the next thing? Oh, I want some mayonnaise. And you roll them back. And you tell your child, when you've had enough input, that's when you tell your mom that they want the top of the sandwich, the top loaf, or the top slice of bread on them. So that it gives you a verbal cue of when you've done enough and when they are regulated. And also helps your child realize what they need and when they feel okay. It's a really lovely activity. And you can also get your child, when you're in the kitchen and you need something in the bedroom, get your child to walk there like a heavy elephant or slither on the floor like a snake. You can do different animal walks that will help them to get that vestibular input and that probe in different ways. Or they can hop like a bunny or jump like a snake or hop on one leg to get the things that you need them to do. And sometimes you just need to do that, whether you need the item or not, just so that they can get that input. When you are getting ready to do homework, hate homework, although I know that you need to do homework, you can do some preparatory activities before you start your homework. So maybe do things like with clay or press stick or anything like that where there's a bit of resistance, especially because homework is a lot of writing. So do some preparatory activities with your fingers before you start writing. Get them to mold the press stick or the Play-Doh, and then you can actually then start writing. It's just a nice way to set the child up with good feedback so that when they start writing, they're not digging their pencil into the paper. Fidget toys are a good way also to get input, but fidget toys can also be a distraction. So it could be part of your arsenal. You need to think of these activities as what you've got in your backpack, and when you need to bring them out to help you with your child in that moment. So fidget toys can be very helpful, but they can also be very distracting. So I have a very sensory-seeking child myself, so I completely understand when we talk about these things. Learning for my child is very difficult. So we've developed strategies at home where he either bowls a ball down my passageway as we are learning his spelling words, or he is throwing a ball against a wall, or he's running around my kitchen counter, or he's jumping on my trampoline. We've figured out ways to learn, whether it's spelling or content for a test, because for him to sit at a table after he's been at school and he's kept it all together at school and now he comes home, he just wants to move, it's quite hard. So that's why I say, as a mom, you've got to figure out what your child's needs are so that you can best help them at home and use these strategies as arsenal when you need to. So that's all for very sensitive, sensory-seeking children. So now what do we do about a sensory-sensitive child where their cup is very small? So this child can become, as I said, overwhelmed very quickly. So we need to prepare that child for situations that can overwhelm them. So a little therapy tip: when your child is getting dysregulated or overwhelmed, use the proprioceptive system to help that child. The proprioceptive system is known as the universal calmer. So that's that deep pressure. If you think about it, when you are upset, what do people do instinctively to you? They come and give you a hug. They give you that deep pressure and you go, oh, yes, I needed that. It's because that deep pressure is the universal calmer. It calms an agitated vestibular and tactile sensitive system. Some of these activities that I've mentioned, you can use them for a sensory-seeking child. With a sensory-seeking child, don't expose your child to the whole thing all at once because it's very overwhelming. So break an activity or break a demand down into little bite sizes that they can then tolerate and manage. And put the movement in between, or the deep pressure in between, to help regulate them. You need to provide some scaffolding to move to the movement that is overwhelming. So if your child is vestibularly sensitive, hold their hand or give deep pressure before you go into a situation where you are moving off the surface of the earth. Or go in things like lifts and elevators where you can use your visual system, or lifts and elevators where you can see, where you can use your visual system to help them override their vestibular system, which is like, I don't know where I'm going, I can't see what I'm doing, I'm moving and I can't control it. Whereas if you use your visual system, it helps them to go, okay, I can see, this is where I'm going, this is where I'm moving to. Stick to activities for your child, and I know that we need to have a bit of flexibility and we need to expose our children to to a variety of sensory input, but try and stick to activities that, for argument's sake, a party or a family gathering, where it's not going to overwhelm your child. So if your child is vestibularly insecure, don't go and do the tree walks or go to a party at the tree walk where you walk through the trees, or go to a party where they're painting, where you know a tactile defensive child is going to react. So sort of pick and choose your battles as to what you're going to expose your child to, because you know that will ultimately have a calmer child. If your child is sensitive to noises, obviously we're going to be in environments where there are a lot of noise, but then use ear muffs or ear cancellers just to help them out if you're going to those sort of environments. And I get this quite a lot, for orally sensitive children who don't like the taste or texture in their mouth, it is very specific to that child, and general principles you can apply them, but not really. It is very specific to that child. But what I can suggest to you, if your child is orally sensitive, is try to expose them to smaller bite-sized pieces of that taste or whatever it is that they don't like, because otherwise they'll avoid it for the rest of their life. You need to expose it to them in small little increments. Even just having the presence of that food on their plate is a big step for some of our children. Get them to play with that food or whatever it is that they don't like. Get them to play with it and then realize that it's actually not as scary as they think it is. And then I've just got some helpful hints. I know I've given you a lot, but just some physically helpful hints. If you're out and about and you can see that your child is getting overwhelmed, and if this is the only thing that you remember, then that's wonderful. You can do what I call the 5 key points of control. It's where you use your proprioceptor system to really help your child. And I've even done it not only with my own children, but when I've seen children around that will allow me to touch them, I've even done it to them just to calm them when they're going into overdrive. So the first thing that you do, and you can all do it so that you can get some oxygen in your body, is you push down on your head. But bear in mind, don't make your spine do funny things. Make your spine straight, and you push down as your head tries to push up. Gives you input straight through your spine. And I don't know if you can feel that. It feels quite nice. Okay, so that's the one. The other thing is where you push down on your shoulders, and your shoulders try to push up. This is lovely. I should have done it to myself before I started the talk. What you can also do, and I'm going to ask Abby if I can do it to you, is, if you don't mind me touching you, is you can put your one hand on the sternum and then on the spine, and then you just push into the spine just gently so that they can feel it through their bones in their spine. You can then pray, put your hands together, and you can have a little bit of a hand tug of war. Does the left hand win? Does the right hand win? You can feel that feedback, you can feel that pushing. And then the last one is finger tugs. So where you actually just pull on your fingers. And it is very calming, but it's very easy just to go to your child and just push them on their head or on their shoulder. Just make sure they don't fall. Don't push too hard. I know sometimes we get a bit of you will probably. And then the one other thing, and this is something that you can do at home if you feel like your child is just getting a little bit overdrive, is what I've also called bone knockers. And Abby, sorry, you're going to have to be my demonstration again. So we do it into our joints of our arms, and you can do it into your knees, your ankles, and even in your hips if you get your child to lie down. So what you do is you bend. Don't resist me. So you're going to then push. Can you see how I'm pushing her upper arm into her shoulder? And then I move it around, and then I do into her wrist and into her elbow.
The kids actually love that.
And then love the bone knockers. And you can do that, and then similarly for your legs. Push down into your ankles, push into your knees, push into your wrists. Feels good. So yeah, so there's the bone knockers and your 5 key points of control are wonderful little helpful hints, very quick, that you can do if you're out and about. Obviously the bone knockers not so much. But the 5 key points of control, you can really do that. So just give that proprioceptive input, and it helps calm. I really should have done it before I started this talk. I hope you have found this interesting. I hope you found it informative. I know it's a lot, but I just want to reiterate what Abby has said. As a mom, you know this journey is not always easy. There are lots of ups and downs, and even more so when we are advocating for our child who doesn't fit the norm or doesn't fit the mold that society makes us fit. So I just want to commend you for coming, for hearing, for listening. I hope you use some of these techniques. And yeah, but thank you for having me.
Thank you.